Ready? Play.
Welcome back to Painting Lines. Last week we recapped an exciting next gen finals, and this week, with the 2025 season kicking off in Brisbane and Hong Kong, we wanted to give our thoughts on the current state of tennis, looking at what happened last year and what we can expect coming up this season. Erik, do you have any ideas about 2024, 2025 you want to think about to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing I'm looking at for 2025 is how different the top 10 is going to look versus 2024, and then also if we're going to have any new slam winners in 2025, if they're going to be any virgins or all people who have won one before.
100%. Yeah, I mean, we had a couple this year, right? I mean, I guess Sinner twice. So
Sinner, yeah.
does that count as two? But
Yeah, nah, it doesn't
yeah.
count.
But
But I do think someone will, other than Sinner and Alcaraz and Djokovic, win a slam next year.
Yeah, but I mean,
But it,
at least this year we did have guys like at the slam they won, three out of the four were won by someone who hadn't won it before, at least.
yeah, yeah, that's true. I wonder if Medvedev will get another one or if he's
Yeah,
done.
we'll see. We'll see. I'll definitely be talking about Medvedev in a little bit. But first up, I just wanted to kind of talk about the trends of the top guys, like who's trending up, who's trending down, and who's kind of stagnating. Starting with trending up, we talked about this in our ATP Awards show, but Jack Draper is definitely a guy that I'm looking for a lot from in 2025 because obviously last year he rose significantly. He's now in the top 15 and is a guy that has a very solid game and can compete with these top level guys.
Yeah, totally. And then, like what we mentioned before, it's pretty much his fitness that has been holding him back, but I feel like he's really kicking it into a new gear. And yeah, I think oof, I want to say top 10. I do think that a good majority of the top 10 guys right now, at least the back half, aren't going to be in the top 10. I think guys like Draper will be in the top 10 for the first time.
Yeah. And then another guy that rose in the same tournament really as Draper is Taylor Fritz, making that US Open final. My question this year is can Fritz actually take that next step to be a pre-tournament favorite at a Grand Slam? Because at the US Open, while he was maybe a high seed, I don't think anybody really expected him to be in a final. Whereas this year, he's a top four guy in the world. You're almost expected to win your quarter and be in those semis with the chance to make a final and be a Grand Slam champion. I don't know whether I necessarily expect that from him at this point, even though he is ranked that highly.
Dude, tell me about it. This is such a tough question because part of me thinks, hey, maybe Taylor just peaked here in a sense, and we're going to see him go back to kind of what he was before. But then the other part of me thinks this was his breakout, and now it's only up from here. And yes, I would like to see him be a favorite, but I just don't know. I think it might be some kind of bias where I just don't see him being a favorite in a slam because it's Taylor Fritz.
Yeah, I think it's one part of it is that we haven't seen enough top level wins from him in
Mhm.
other tournaments, right? You look at
Right.
someone like a Sinner or an Alcaraz, they're winning Masters 1000 tournaments as well. Fritz has won a Masters 1000, but he hasn't won multiple. And that's kind of what you expect from someone before they get to the point where they're winning a Grand Slam.
Yeah, and it's also, he's kind of spotty here and there, Fritz too, because he'll make a Grand Slam final, but then he'll lose the next round, or sorry, lose first round next tournament. So it's kind of just, it's hard to tell with him. I think his potential is there, but I just don't know if he has the consistency to outlast, other people in a five set slam.
Yeah, 100%. But speaking on the top 10, because you said there are some guys that you were looking at, you think they're going to drop out. It's actually very interesting because if you look at the top 13 guys in 2023, they actually were the exact same 13 guys, or actually there was one difference between 2023 and 2024. I wanted to ask you, do you know who the one guy different was, Erik?
I think it's Runa, Holger
No, because
Runa.
he actually stayed. He was number 13. So that's why I
Oh, he
kind of
was
had
number
it. Yeah, he
13.
went from 8 to 13.
Oh,
But the one guy was mainly due to an injury, and that's Hurkacz, because
Hurkacz.
he
Yeah, yeah,
obviously
yeah.
ended at, I think, 9 in 2023 and then dropped out because he was injured. But it's funny because even with him, like he stayed in the top 20. Like a lot of these guys in the top 20 stayed the same. I would have done the same stat with the top 20, but there were a couple at the end there that were like just outside and just moved in. So I didn't want to, I wanted to be a little bit more, have the stat favor my argument, but
Yeah, lucky number 13 too.
exactly. But it is interesting to see that there's that level of consistency with these top guys, and it's kind of stagnating. There's not that much of a change in that top level, and I wonder, like, is this a good thing for the sport where you get to see, oh, these are my favorite players, I get to see them succeed all the time throughout the year, or is it a bad thing where you don't see as many like breakout guys that are really exploding onto the scene? I mean, we do have these top guys in like this new generation of big players. I mean, we have Sinner and Alcaraz, and guys like Zverev have been playing really well, but is it really good if we don't have new guys coming in every year? Do we want it
Mhm.
to stay the same sometimes from year to year?
So this is a pretty interesting question. I think it depends on who's staying there. For example, like the guys that are there right now, if they're pretty likable and have a good fan base, then I think it's great for the sport that they're able to maintain that level. And then also, if there's a breakout player, but he doesn't have much of a personality, he's not really a fan favorite. I'm thinking of someone like Lehechka, like someone who's kind of low key but is breaking out right now. Whereas contrast that with Alcaraz. Alcaraz broke out onto the scene and he's super fun to watch. He carries such a large fan base. Like having new explosive players like that is great for the sport. So I think a little bit of both. Like you need your, consistent, let's say 5 to 8 guys or call it top 20 here. But then you also need a couple wild cards that break out that, grow the sport in a sense where I have buddies who weren't watching tennis before who actually don't really know much about tennis, but they know who Carlos Alcaraz is. Like they know who Sinner is. Like guys who, will be on ESPN because ESPN doesn't generally cover tennis as much. So you just need that exposure from a breakout player. But then also to contrast that too, the consistent guys have a fan base that like people day in and day out know that they can root for them and that they'll make it far into a tournament.
100%. I mean, the guy I was thinking of when you were talking about that is Dimitrov for sure,
Hmm.
where like he's not really that explosive of a player right now. You don't really expect him to necessarily win a tournament, but
Yeah.
you can root for him for a few rounds at least.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of guys like Zverev and Medvedev, who I don't know, generally they're not that well liked. I don't think like I personally like them, but Medvedev is super controversial. And then Zverev also had that, domestic violence allegation. So I feel like those guys at the top of the sport, like maybe in a couple years, it might be nice to have a fresh face in there because I don't think they're necessarily the best representation of tennis. But yeah, like a guy like Dimitrov is, perfect example. Maybe someone like Rude too.
100%. Yeah. I mean, then again, with a guy like Lehechka, I was thinking about that, and I'm like, I wonder if you would know more about his personality if he broke out into maybe the top 10. Because you look
Hmm.
at all the media coverage that all these interviews and stuff that go with these guys that are in the top 10, you learn more and more about him. You start to like these players more. When a guy is in the top maybe 25, 30, he doesn't get that same amount of coverage. So someone like Lehechka may have a really fun, interesting personality when
Hmm.
once you see more of it, but we haven't seen that much of it. I feel like you have to actually deep dive into him to see uh, his background. Whereas when he gets to a certain level, he may start getting more kind of pushed by the tennis media.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there is some bias too. Like someone like Tiafo is very heavily covered in the media because he has a great personality and he's like super I guess I don't know how to say this, but he's very like outgoing, I guess, on the court and joke around. So I
Yeah,
feel like
energetic,
yeah, energetic, like fun to watch. So I think it
100%.
takes a little bit of that too. But then also back to Medvedev, because this is funny. I just think he's super polarizing. Like I know people who love Medvedev because he's the way he is, but then you also have people who hate him because they're, oh, he's disrespecting the sport. He looks like he doesn't want to be out there. He's throwing matches. So, and he's good because he does speak his mind too. Like in a
Yeah.
press conference, he is just raw and unfiltered.
Yeah. It's funny because to an extent, you think about Medvedev and you're like, ironically, I think he's a lot like Kyrgios in some of those senses, where he is outspoken, he speaks his mind. I think the difference is with Kyrgios takes a lot more shots at people, whereas
Personally.
Medvedev, it's more like he will respond if someone says something to him. But
Hmm.
I can't think of one off the top of my head where he just like attacked someone out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, I know he and Zverev kind of go back and forth, like with the illegal bathroom breaks.
Yeah, but I feel like that was more like a response to someone else's comment. Like he didn't
Hmm.
really, or someone else's.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah. Wait, well, someone trending down. What about Tsitsipas?
Tsitsipas. I mean, I was going to talk about him a little bit
You
later.
were? Okay.
I had him in my kind of anomalies area of
Uh-huh.
this people to talk about, which is the clay rats, which is him and Rude. Uh,
Hmm.
what can we expect really from them on any surface other than clay this year? Because last year they did excellent during the clay season. I mean, they were dominant. They won Monte Carlo in the final. It was them too, and then Barcelona. It was them in the final, like back to back weeks. But outside of the clay season, it was like they were just nowhere pretty much. Not that they didn't win any matches, but like they weren't really competitors in any other tournaments. And it was just so confusing to me because I feel like a couple of years ago they were guys like Tsitsipas made an Australian
Hmm.
Open final, like Rude made the U.S. Open final a couple of years ago, and now
Hmm.
it's like they're only good on clay. It seems like.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny that when I was thinking of falling from grace, Tsitsipas came to my mind. But then when we were talking about, or when I was talking about established players and whether or not they're being good for the sport, I brought up Zverev, Medvedev, and Tsitsipas didn't even cross my mind. So I think that goes a lot. That goes a long way. I think we can still expect good results on hard court, but I just don't think, he'll be making slam finals like he was. But I think he'll still be top 15 player.
Yeah, but do you think he has like a chance to maybe make a slam final at the French, where
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he's staying in that clay rat category with Rude.
yeah, one of the top clay players in the world for
Hmm.
sure.
Maybe it's a strategy for him. Maybe, he's getting to that age where he is prioritizing clay and he's going to grind out all those tournaments to save his ranking.
Yeah,
Hmm.
interesting to think about just only really focusing on the one surface, but
Yeah,
could be
yeah. Maybe
effective.
it's his playing style too. It's starting to change.
Yeah. But anyway, speaking of guys trending down, another guy that I wanted to talk about is Djokovic, obviously like the biggest name in
Hmm.
the sport. And last year, we just didn't dominate like he did in the past, didn't win a title outside of the Olympics, which isn't an ATP event. And I'm just wondering what we can expect this year because obviously we saw him take that step back. And does he have the desire really to play a full 2 week tournament and win a Grand Slam? At this point, it's one of those things where like, what's driving him? And if it's not enough, should he just retire? Because it's hard to keep driving someone, especially at his age, when there's nothing really to fight for except breaking your own records, really.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like at this point I might as well just flip a coin to say like yes or no because you really don't know with him. At first he says that he's only going to play slams and Davis Cup, and then now he's in Brisbane playing, and now he has Andy Murray as a coach, which may spark a little bit of a fire under him right now to try and do more. So I don't know. I think he doesn't even know what he's doing, like whether or not he's going to go full tilt or if he's just going to kind of coast out his last couple of years as a professional player.
Yeah. One interesting thing
Mhm.
about the Murray coaching I saw that Djokovic said was he was talking about having Murray as his coach, obviously. And he said, oh, it's really weird because now I'm sharing secrets with Murray that about what I'm thinking about on the court. And it's just funny because these are all things Murray probably was thinking, oh, I wish I'd known this when I was
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
against you.
Dude, it would be awesome if they did a documentary on this. If they had like a little film crew following them around.
Yeah. If
I think
imagine
this
they
is
won the
historical.
Australian Open, that'd be so cool.
Oh my God. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
But what do you think
If it win
on
a,
Djokovic?
I mean, I think honestly, we'll see. We'll see in the first tournament of the year, Australian Open, or the
Mhm.
first slam of the year. The Australian Open is his best slam historically. He's won it what 10 times, something
Yeah.
ridiculous. So we'll see how he performs there. If he doesn't do incredible, like make a final, for example,
Yeah.
I don't see him winning any other
Hmm.
slams.
Yeah, and I think it all depends on how well he plays against Alcaraz and Sinner because Djokovic was going through like an awkward or weird transition period where there was, the tail end of Rafa, no more Federer, and he needed someone to be pushed. And Alcaraz just kind of filled that void for him. And you saw that fire reignite in Djokovic, beat him in the Olympics, had a, five setter against him in Wimbledon. So, or not this Wimbledon, but the one before.
Yeah, and that incredible Cincinnati Masters match they
Cincinnati,
had.
yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking maybe if we get good matchups there, we can see some flashes of Djokovic, but generally I don't think he's going to dominate too much anymore.
Yeah, and I think just his activity level is not going to be super high in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
the number of tournaments he plays.
Yeah, we'll see. I bet we'll see some low-level players get wins off of him and be able to tell their kids, "Hey, I beat Novak Djokovic."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, those late career wins.
Yep. Yep.
I also funny he's playing I think Monfils coming up. So
Oh
can
my
Monfils
God.
get the win? Is his first win over Djokovic?
Dude, I hope so. That'd be awesome.
That'd be pretty crazy.
The
But
old
anyway,
dogs.
another guy we already talked about a little bit is Medvedev, because I feel like Medvedev is kind of trending downwards just because even though he is still a top five player, it's
Mhm.
not the same level that he was in previous years. Like, obviously, when he beat Djokovic at that US Open final in 2021, that was a super high level of Medvedev because he was playing a guy that was playing for the calendar slam. And
Yeah.
his ability level, I don't know if it's dropped, just feels like it's been surpassed by other
Mhm.
people. And the question is whether he can elevate his game. Is it possible to elevate his game so that he can beat someone like Sinner or Alcaraz? You look at his matchups with those guys last year, he lost five times to Sinner, beat him once, and lost all three matchups against Alcaraz. That's not something you want to see from a guy that isn't in the top five. You hope that he'll at least win a couple against Sinner, given the number of times they played, and at least one against Alcaraz, but it just didn't happen. And it seemed like it was because he just didn't have that aggression in his game.
So I have a theory. Hear me out here. So do you remember that 2021? I feel like that was peak adversity for Medvedev. Like when Djokovic was playing for that calendar slam, he had the whole entire Arthur Ashe Stadium behind him, all rooting against Medvedev. And Medvedev, it was around that time where remember he came out and he said, "Hey, if I'm not going to get the respect from fans, I'm going to stop playing. I'm going to stop playing these tournaments. I'm only going to play in Russia." But he was playing so well when all that was happening. And now that he's, kind of a fan favorite, like when I was at the US Open, Sinner Medvedev, I would say it was pretty split. People do root for Medvedev nowadays, and I feel like he might just need, the crowd against him and
He needs
some
to be the
adversity
villain.
to do well.
He
I
needs to
generally
be the
think,
villain.
yeah.
That's crazy. I honestly, I mean, not
Look at
not
him. He's
when
trending
you look
down
at
since
yeah,
then.
when you
Now that
look
he's
at
more liked.
yeah, when
Yeah.
you look at the results, it's not a bad theory, I guess, but it does seem kind of crazy.
Yeah, yeah, but I do think he's a very smart guy, high tennis IQ. So I think this will be an inflection point in his career. Like after his results that he just had, will he come back and make the proper adjustments, change up his game, like study or analyze other players that he needs to like do well to excel in this next, call it era of tennis?
Yeah, 100%.
I think he can. I think he can get it done, but
Yeah, I
we'll
mean,
see.
it's funny because I feel like you look at some of the guys that are at the top right now, and what are their weaknesses? It feels like. What do you target when you're playing against Sinner?
Yeah,
Really
I
tough
don't know.
to figure out. I mean, even with Alcaraz, it seems as though the only way to really beat him is hope that he isn't consistent that day. Because
Yeah,
there are some days where he just has a bunch of errors and then he loses the match. I
yeah.
don't know how to beat him if he's on.
I was
So
gonna say.
it's
I think there's.
a tough
Go
nut to
ahead.
crack.
Yeah, no, it is. I think there's more of a like Sinner has more of the mental. edge. Like you can't Alcaraz, like you said, you can just hope that he's making a lot of errors and that maybe he's not having a great mental day. But Sinner, I feel like is just always locked in. Like there's
Yeah.
no instance where Sinner loses his cool and just starts imploding on the court.
Yeah, and that's why
And he's got all the other tools.
that's why they always like teach to be cool on the court is
Hmm.
because your opponent can't see when you're imploding.
Yeah, yeah. I know
Sinner
it'll
could
be
implode in every match, but we just don't
yeah.
see it.
Yeah, yeah. And like certain guys, it's funny how their strategy is to make the guy across the net implode. Like someone like Mute or even someone like Kyrgios, kind of
Bublik,
Medvedev too. Like they want to get in your head.
100%, 100%.
Sinner, no time for that.
Yeah. Um, Another few guys I want to talk about here are some guys that have kind of fallen from grace, and the standouts to me are guys like Tiafo, Felix Auger-Aliassime, Rublev, and kind of Runa as well, where they're guys that do have a super high top level. They are able to perform with the best of the best when they're on their day, but just aren't able to hold it together consistently. And you see them losing in a lot of first round matches and just not performing like we know they can. And I'm wondering if they can step it up this year, get back to where we've seen them in the past, especially someone like FAA, where he's really fallen off. He hasn't shown that he can really play at that top 20 level consistently. He had one good tournament last year, and it's kind of a bummer because we know he can be a really high level player. Same thing with Tiafo. He had one good month last year.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then this year, in the rest of the year, it was just really underperforming generally.
So
You
was it
look at,
underperforming or was it kind of average? It was
I'd say
under.
underperforming because he was losing in a lot of first round or second round matches. He wasn't
Mhm.
making it far in tournaments at all. Even Rublev, with the amount of terrible performance he had, he at least balanced that with good performances when he was playing well. Tiafo, it would be first round loss, second round loss. Rublev,
Yeah.
it might be first round loss, makes the final.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then
Yeah.
the same thing with Runa. We've talked about him as he thought he was the new big three with
Yeah.
him, Alcaraz, and Sinner, and he just hasn't been able to be at the same level as those guys, even though he does have the tools in his game to be at that level. It seems.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I was looking up for Runa this year. Pretty excited. And then Brisbane, he loses first round. But that was to Lehechka. So I think that's a respectable loss. I do think out of all the guys you mentioned, Runa has the most ability to bounce back just because he is the youngest and in my opinion the most talented right now. Like I think Rublev is comparable, but I think he's older and kind of at the tail end of his peak. Tiafo, you know, bold prediction, maybe he'll have a great US Open, but other than that, I don't see him, cracking top 10 anytime
Yeah,
soon or
I
even
mean, he
top
had a
15.
great U.S. Open the last 2 years. So
Exactly. Yeah.
other than that, I don't know what he's done really.
Yeah. And then FAA, man, I think we might see some spurts of it. Like, hey, he may win a 250 here and there, but I don't think he's going to put on consistent results. I think we might see some sporadic titles.
Yeah, I can see that being the case for him. Honestly, for
Mhm.
the rest of his career.
Yeah. Yep.
But moving on to some anomalies, guys that I want to talk about are guys like I already talked about Tsitsipas and Rude, but a guy like Deminar. My question with Deminar is, does he actually have the technical ability to break through in a big way this year? Because obviously he performed at the highest level of his career last year, made it into the top 10, did a great job, but it seemed that he was very reliant on his scrappiness in his level of play. And it seems to me that the question with Deminar is, are his strokes actually proficient enough to hang with a guy like Alcaraz? I wouldn't really, if I had those two guys on the court, it seems as though Alcaraz really has the edge in almost every part of the game.
Right. The stroke from Deminar that sticks out to me the most is his backhand as just being very like passive, like he's not gonna hit a crazy backhand at all. It's just kind of getting, it's a shot that gets it back. Um, and yeah, I mean, we're starting to see holes in his game as far as him being scrappy. Like, can his body hold up? Because I know he's kind of had some injuries this year too. And it's kind of like Rafa, but Rafa was able to overcome it. Like, Rafa played a very scrappy game and also happened to be injured a lot, but he was able to take care of his body and bounce back. Deminar, he's getting to that age, man. He's getting a little older. I don't think his body's going to be handling these injuries as well. I don't know. I don't think he has the technical ability
Yeah. Another
to
thing
be
with
quite
Deminar and
honest.
Rafa is Rafa's technical ability on his shots. He spun the ball so
Yeah.
aggressively that it didn't matter if he really smacked it flat
Hmm.
because people had to deal with the amount of weight that he put on the ball with his spin. Deminar, I don't see the same thing. So if he puts kind of a defensive shot out there, it's a lot easier for opponents to attack it than it was with someone like Rafa.
Yeah, for sure. And then Rafa also with that king of clay too. Like, it's not like Deminar really excels on a certain surface, right? Maybe hard and grass,
Yeah,
which is kind of
weird. Yeah,
counterintuitive,
counterintuitive,
right?
exactly. Um,
Interesting.
and then the last guy in my anomalies category is Dimitrov, where I'm
Mm.
just wondering, is there enough left in the tank with him? Obviously, he's older. He's one of the oldest guys outside of Djokovic, was the oldest guy in the top 10. Is there enough left for him to make a big performance? We saw the last couple of years, him making the finals of a couple Masters 1000s, couldn't get it over the line because he was playing guys that were simply at the top of the game at that point. And when you look at someone like him, it never really feels as though he's been that guy that was unbeatable. And it's hard to say that he'll be able to beat guys that now are reaching their peak.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think he'll be a contender. Like, he's not someone that comes to mind when you're saying, "Oh, slam favorite." But yeah, he may win a 250 or even a 500 if the draw is wide open, if there's, no center Alcaraz in there, but yeah, he's I think he's on his way out. Hate to say it.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but I
But
think I agree. I think we'll probably see a regression from him in 2025. Probably
mhm.
drop into the low teens or even into the 20s, and
Yeah,
then maybe a couple years later, we'll probably see a retirement from him.
yeah, which, top 20, it's still good. I think he'll still have a good year. I just don't think he'll be up there with the rest of the guys.
Yeah. Um, Another category I want to talk about that I think is maybe one of the most interesting ones is the young guys to watch. Starting off with Feast. Obviously, we talked about him in the next gen finals, but he's just a guy that's super young, already in the top 20, and he's had a couple years on the tour now. So my question is whether this will be the year that he can actually take it to that next level, because obviously he's coming in with momentum. Obviously, he didn't do great at the next gen finals this year, but still he's coming in with this momentum off of a great year where he won two titles. And I feel like a lot of eyes are on him as, okay, is he going to be maybe a guy that can step up and compete with Alcaraz and Sinner? Maybe he's the guy that surpasses Runa and becomes that big three with Sinner and Alcaraz.
Totally. We're going to see a big 2025 from Feast. I can just already tell. Couple ifs here. If there was a line that had Feast finishing the top 10 at the end of 2025, I would, if I had a house, put the mortgage of my house on that bet because I'm super confident in this.
Yeah. And then
He's got a great game for the
100%.
year.
Very exciting game too to watch.
Uh-huh.
And then another guy I want to talk about is Impeshi Pericard, the young Frenchman. Kind of exploded onto the scene last year, and he's a very dangerous game with that massive serve he has, and often follows it in with the serve +1, which we've talked about.
Mhm.
Great at putting away points quickly. So I think he has the tools, particularly obviously on his serve, to compete with the best, just because of how kind of hard he smacks the ball.
Yeah, this one I'm not as sure because I don't think he has as complete of a game as Feast. I'd like to see him break serve better, but I think this will just get better in time. Like, I don't think 2025 will be his best year. I think he may be a 2026, 2027 because I think he still needs to develop that part. which will come in time. I just don't think it's quite yet.
100%. Yeah, I mean, the thing that kind of is almost a good thing when you have a lot to work on in your return game is you have that great service to
Yeah.
rely on. So it's like he has so much room to improve in his return game that maybe as he works on that, you'll see him just take massive steps
Mhm.
ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the last young guy to watch I had written down here is João Fonseca, who obviously just won the Next Gen Finals at 18, really made a statement with his undefeated record in that tournament, and is just definitely a young talent to look out for. Where he really was not a guy going into that tournament we expected a ton from. We were like, oh, he probably has he's an exciting game. It'll be interesting to see him. But the fact that he was able to beat guys like Thies, Mensick, really just shows that he has that ability to compete with guys in the top 50 at least.
Hmm.
So, especially at 18 years old, he's only going to grow and get better.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually in his home country right now, Brazil. So, yeah,
Feeling a
no, I
connection to him.
feeling yeah, I'm like trying to stalk him here. Where's he at? But very excited for Joao. I think that, this is another one I'm kind of unsure about, like whether or not he's going to totally break out 2024. Because remember, we saw someone like Van Ash who was supposed to be, the next big thing and then didn't quite have that year in 2024. So I don't know. I mean, I think Joao, he's going to be, he's forgoing college. So he's going to be full time on the tour, which
Yeah, he's not going to
is
be studying mathematics like Van Ash is.
right. Exactly. So that's another thing. But yeah, no, I think he's going to be a great guy to watch 2025.
100%. And then the last kind of section of guys I wanted to talk about in this episode is the dangerous guys sitting just outside the top 20. If you start at number 21, you have Shelton, Korda, Tabilo, Poprin, Mahach, Jordan Thompson, Baez, and Lehechka. These are all guys that we saw in 2024 that were threats in tournaments. They didn't necessarily win a bunch of tournaments. They didn't necessarily have the greatest season, but they were guys where, oh, you look at Tabilo, he made it super far in Rome. You look at someone like Korda, who made the semis in Cincinnati. You look at Mahach, he had some big wins. You look at Thompson, he made the round of 16 of the US Open.
Mhm.
All these guys were players that, when they were playing their best, could perform and compete with guys at the top of the game. I mean, even someone like Baez, where didn't necessarily perform that great on hard courts, but on clay he was a real threat. So I just think it's interesting to see all these names sitting just outside the top 20, and they're probably hungry to take a step up and get back to that top level in 2025. But I'm just wondering if they can break up that deadlocked top 13 players.
Yeah, I know. This is a great group of guys, and I think they fall into that bucket of when you're looking at a draw, you're like, "Ooh, Corda." Like it's someone that their name carries a lot of weight, but their ranking may not necessarily reflect that, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think it's that danger aspect where you
Uh-huh.
see, oh, it's Medvedev in the third round against Mahach. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, Medvedev's definitely favored in this match, but I wouldn't be overly shocked if Mahach got it done.
Yeah. So out of these guys, who do you think has the most potential to break into the top 13?
I mean, I would say probably Shelton still of these guys
Yeah.
because Shelton has been up there before.
Yeah, he's been damn near what, like 14?
I think he's been in the top 10 at his
Wow.
peak ranking,
Wow.
and he has a very dangerous game. It's just whether he can consistently hold that peak level,
Mhm.
which I think is the case with a lot of these guys. I think maybe that's the theme of this entire episode is a lot of the guys we're talking about, it's whether they can perform consistently. And that's why the top 13 has stayed kind of deadlocked, because those are the guys that at least somewhat uh, regularly can play at a high level. Whereas
Yeah.
guys outside of that, they have high peaks, but
Mhm.
they also have low lows, and they have ruts they can get stuck in.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the guys that I think won't break into the top 13 is Thompson, just because he prioritizes doubles too. Like he is just as much a doubles player as he is a singles player. Whereas a lot of other guys, a lot of singles players just play doubles as kind of like a extra rep type of thing in a tournament, whereas Thompson like wins double slam. So I just
Yeah.
think he needs to focus on one or the other to actually like go all in.
Well, I mean, does he need to focus on one or the other? Because if he's a doubles player that's making the round of 16 at the U.S. Open, that's pretty impressive, to be honest. So
Anomaly,
I,
complete anomaly.
yeah, it may be an anomaly, but that's it happened. So we got to talk about it.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
anyway, obviously, there's a few other big names that could play a big part in the 2025 season that we haven't mentioned. I mean,
mhm.
someone like a Berrettini. I mean,
Umber.
where's he going to be at? Yeah, Umber, Tommy Paul. I haven't really talked about those guys, but
Mhm.
it would take way too long probably to name all the guys that
Right.
could play a part in this season. So this is just kind of a taste of some of our thoughts on the really top elite level guys. So that I think wraps up my thoughts on some players to look for in 2025.
Yeah. Curious to hear your guys' thoughts too. Like, who do you think will be a top 10 player in 2025? And who do you think will not that is currently in?
100%.
Hey guys, before we jump in, we have some exciting news. We recently partnered with TruePro. They're a great place to buy strings, grips, and tennis apparel. Use discount code Painting Lines, that's one word, for 20% off store wide. You can find the link in our bio.
But alrighty, you ready to hop into segments here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alrighty, what's new in tennis? What'd you see this week?
So I saw another engagement on the tour. This time your boy Alex Deminar. He just got engaged to the British tennis player Katie Bolter. So that adds on to another male-female tennis relationship. This is interesting because we're starting to see those guys like FAA, Rude, and now Deminar, who we kind of, followed onto the tour when they're young kids, like, making their runs. And now they're getting to that age where they're getting engaged, which is pretty crazy here. And once again, will it impact their play? Who knows?
Time flies, man. Time flies.
Time
Crazy.
flies. Yeah. Yeah. How about you? What did you see this week?
I saw something actually you sent to me, which was a few days ago, and I we haven't talked about it yet, so I just wanted to bring up the Max Purcell ban
Mm,
happened last week. So just another case of a high level player getting hit for doping. I mean, high level player, especially in doubles, won the U.S. Open with Thompson last year. So it just brings up this question of like, what is the right move in a scenario like this? I mean, yes, if he was doping, then you got to have some sort of consequence for that. But I mean, there is the situation with Sinner. I don't think that I agree with one part of Curious's statement, which is it shouldn't be a special treatment for the top
mhm.
guy. I think Sinner, if he was at fault, not at fault, he shouldn't have been banned. But with the number with the bans coming after him, it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like he got an exception because he was the number one player, which doesn't seem super fair to me.
Yeah, yeah. This case was pretty interesting too because the reason was like he received an IV over the appropriate amount of like vitamin. Like for example, I think the limit is 100 milliliters of like these certain vitamins, and he got over that. And he actually, I think, volunteered as like a provisional suspension. So like what he's doing right now while they're actually looking into the case is he's essentially suspended himself so that when they do find a verdict, like the time served already counts.
100%. Yeah.
So,
It's probably a smart move too to do it like right now. I mean, it's a bummer for
mhm,
him because
yeah,
they're in the Australian section of the year right
yeah,
now, but it's probably smart because you don't want to do it like right in the middle of like May through June where it's
hmm
really all kind of happening.
yeah, yeah. And this would have been curious if he, I guess what I'm trying to say is Kyrgios's take on his own countrymen because he's been brutal on Sinner, but I don't think he's said anything about Purcell yet.
Yeah, but I do think that with Purcell, it's like he is doing a
He's
ban.
serving his time.
He's
Yeah.
serving his time. It's not like he's getting an exception with it. But the thing with Kyrgios and Center, I mean, we've talked about this last week,
Hmm.
but it just the fact that it's so aggressive towards Sinner. Wouldn't it be better to attack the? I mean, like the I don't know what the body is called that does the
WADA,
doping.
World Anti-Doping
Yeah,
Agency, or
yeah, whatever it is, WADA. it wouldn't it be better to attack them and be like, hey, don't give exceptions for this stuff. That's
Yeah.
not fair to players that you have banned, rather
Hmm.
than attacking Sinner, who, based on all of their investigation, wasn't really at fault.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Also, I feel like once Sinner had that controversy, like tested positive, now I feel like there's a snowball effect too because you have Swiatek, she just tested positive for something, and then now Purcell. I feel like it's becoming more common. I don't know. Maybe that's just because of these three players and there's recency bias. And if there's always, a couple players who fail a drug test every year, but we just don't hear about it.
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
feel like
like
this is
a
like kind
couple
of
years ago, we
uncommon.
had Jari, right? He had the
Yeah.
doping
Yeah.
test. So I
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's relatively common where it's like
Hmm.
someone goes a little bit over the limit. I think it's probably uncommon to see someone that gets caught with a massive amount in their system, but that's just how it is with everything. Everybody's doing it not to get caught, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
doing it outright in hopes that they don't get uh, tested.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
it's kind of, it goes back to the fundamentals of doping. Like, this little IV, did it really make him play better? Did it give him an edge? Maybe. And then in Svitek's case, it was like her melatonin pills were, I guess, what do you call it?
contaminated.
Damaged. Yeah, contaminated. Exactly. So it's like stuff like that, that's kind of 50-50 on the player versus, straight up Pete Rose, like taking steroids.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a difference. And then Sinner getting cholesterol
Yeah,
rubbed into him from his trainer, like with minuscule amounts.
yeah. 100%. It's tough to say about
Yeah.
doping a lot of the time. But anyway, how about a bet of the week?
Out of the week, I'm taking GMP Pesci Pericard plus 120 over Tiafo. So I'm pretty sure this was one of your bets of the week, right? A couple months ago.
I think so. Yeah,
I do remember specifically you being like, "Oh, dude, like
yeah.
I don't know how
Free
Tiafo
money
is
against
a favorite."
Tiafo.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I guess I'm looking at it like that. I also think GMP played well against Kyrgios. Like I don't really know what to expect from Kyrgios, but he looked like an absolute machine serving out there. And I just think he's too dominant for Tiafo, at least on serve. And he just needs to, get that mini break in the tiebreaker if it
Yeah,
comes down to
it looks like, I mean, with
it.
Tiafo also doesn't have a weak serve. So
Yeah.
I wonder if we'll
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
a second curious match where it just goes to multiple tie breaks.
Yeah, like what you like to call surf fest.
Exactly. Um, I went with Morojan plus 245 over Rublev this week.
Oh, you're looking for a headhunt?
100%. And because we all know what Morojan can do,
Yeah.
it's good odds here. They really gave Rublev the edge. And it's their first match of the season. Or it's Rublev's first match of the season. And it really didn't end on a high note for him last year.
Hmm.
So I don't know if he's coming in with, really a lot of drive in this tournament. It's not that big of a tournament. And Morojan won his first round match, so he has a little bit of momentum there. I
Hmm.
just think we could see an upset here.
So is there another line on here about whether or not there's gonna be a Rublev outburst? I'd like to hammer the
I
over.
wish, yeah, I wish it was just like a number of Rublev outbursts per match
Yeah.
over three.
How about over under on Morojan drop shot attempts?
Oh my God,
Think he'll be
probably
spamming that one again?
28. I don't know.
Jeez.
Yeah,
All
and then
right, how about match of the week?
match of the week, I went with another guy from the next gen finals, Bassa Veretti versus Monfils. It was a match of young versus old. And I just thought it was a really exciting match because we got a lot of back and forth with breaks of serve, which I think is really what can make a match interesting. Or at least if it comes, there's a lot of situations where it's almost broken serve. Some matches you look at it and it's like, yeah, there were some good points in there, but in general, nobody really was in danger when they were on their serve. In this
Mhm.
match, there were some breaks. Monfils got some breaks in the first set. Bosov already broke back. Monfils ended up taking it. Bosov already got breaks in the second set. They broke back and forth in the third. Third, kind of Monfils pulled away a little bit, but in the end, it's just exciting to see because you don't know where the match is going to end up. Whereas when someone's holding serve consistently very easily, you kind of feel like, okay, this person has control of the match and eventually they're going to break the opponent's serve.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love these multi-generational matches, like where you have Basaverdi, who's literally coming onto the scene, starting his career, and then Monfils at the very tail end of it. But Monfils still prevails. It's like the old guy not quite ready to pass on the torch. He's like, no, 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 not so fast here.
Exactly.
And I kind of like when the old prevails. What about you?
I mean, I gotta say, I root for the older guy most of the time, just
Yeah.
because you know him better, right?
Yeah.
You know, you've seen them for multiple years, whereas the young guy, you don't really want him to fail, but you're like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't want you to succeed today."
Yeah, he also has, if he has a good career, 10 to 15 more years playing, where, this loss is minuscule. Whereas Monfils, limited time out there. So you want to make every match count, get as many wins
100%,
as you can.
100%. What about you? What'd you go for?
I went for a doubles match this week. Kyrgios and Djokovic, they take down Mies and Erler. So I don't normally watch doubles. I don't think you normally watch doubles either, but had to tune into this one. It's kind of the talk of the town for the last half month, but I think there was great chemistry between the two. There was a lot of high fives, a lot of fist bumps. They were calling each other by their like first names, which is pretty interesting to hear. I kind of felt at times that they were treating this like an exhibition match where Djokovic would like be cracking jokes on the changeover, and then Kyrgios is hitting trick shots between his legs, which is entertaining to watch, but I also think a little bit disrespectful to the other team. I don't know. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I just don't really love that because I feel like you have two guys who are kind of making a joke out of this, whereas the other two guys are like pure doubles players. But overall, I thought they were great points. I saw Djokovic moving pretty well out there. And then just a lot of excitement from the crowd too. I'm sure this was one where if you were at that tournament, you were going to watch. Whereas, other doubles matches at tournaments tend to not fill up the crowd. I think this one, at least it sounded like a full crowd. So just overall very entertaining.
100%. Yeah, I watched some of the highlights too. It did feel like to an extent they were treating it like an exhibition, but they did win the
Mhm.
match. So
They did. They did.
it's hard to count that again. If they had lost badly, then it
Yeah.
would have kind of been an embarrassment. But I
Yeah.
think the fact they were able to win kind of shows that they were taking it seriously enough.
Yeah, and I think they did this because if they did lose, they can just kind of like brush it off. It's like, oh, look, like we were joking around, we still had a good time.
Maybe. I mean, also I think it's just how they were
That's just how
as a
they
team,
roll. Yeah.
how they were rolling.
Well, I know that's how Kyrgios rolls, but it's Djokovic. That's the one, now that he's at the end of his career, he can kind of take a deep breath and
Letting
just play
loose, having
free.
fun.
Yeah, he's having fun, man. That's what it's all about. All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.